Okay, so welcome to the MVM stage. I personally often think that AI is actually pretty objective. I mean, you ask it 2 + 2, hopefully it will say 4. Obviously, it's famously good at coding. If it wants to write website code, the website code must be objectively the right code for the website to work, for instance, or any sort of coding. Is AI objective?
So thank you very much. Thank you very much for the invitation. And it's a very natural thing what you just described. We so love certainty. Our brains love certainty. We really want to know that all these facts are true. We always want to have certainty, and we have a hard time dealing with uncertainty. And we even have a hard time grasping the concept of there is uncertainty. So our brain has this, and you mentioned it already, it's seemingly objective. Because yes, we are all raised up with a calculator. You know, you can type the numbers, and obviously when you learn it in school, that's kind of correct what comes out of it. And I think, who has used an AI, I assume, in the younger generation? No. So
maybe we should ask who hasn't, almost.
Yes. The output is like very convincing because it really appears so intelligent.
Yeah.
And so there is a big misconception, and you maybe heard already about this. Hallucinations, biases. Why are they there? It's just because we are biased. In the first place, let's leave the AI aside for a minute. In the first place, humans have over 200 biases in our brain. We factor negativity more than positivity. We do have straight line instinct, so we think always everything is progressing in a straight line. I mentioned the uncertainty stuff. There are things our brains just make up. Now, let's look now in the systems, how they learned.
Yeah.
And right now, the systems which we have behind these models, because AI is much broader than just LLMs and chatbots, but how they were trained, they have grasping all the knowledge from what we have put out in the internet, from things we wrote in books, from things which have put out on social media, and they learn from the best.
Yeah.
They learn from a very biased worldview, and we know all of this. So they took the information, which was already biased and very subjective of who put the information out there, and now they're in these models. And now we have to deal with a situation which seemingly is objective, but we need to rethink. We really need to question, is the output really right? Because we have seen tons of examples where this technology is already making many mistakes, and as well is appearing to be objective, but then because there are these subjective biases behind, making very flaws, very wrong things. Can I give you an example?
Yeah, please, go ahead.
Okay, so who of you have ever heard about vegetable electron microscope? No one. Okay, when you go home, go on Google Scholar. There are 20 papers on Google Scholar citing vegetable electron microscope or vegetable electron microscopy.
Yeah.
It's cited on Google Scholar, so you might think somebody needs to invent something or somebody needs to write something.
Yeah.
The reason why it showed up there was the following. Scientific papers have a specific structure they're published in, and this is not something like looking like a Word document from left to right. They are writing papers, you see it as well in newspapers, like in columns. Like there's a column with text on the right side, and then it goes on the other side. So when an AI who likes to learn to read from left to right, it really reads the lines from left to right. So what happened, there was a study where on the right column, the sentence ended with vegetable. There was a break because it was a column. And on the right side, there is electron microscopy. So it took it as a word. And now, because people writing studies and papers with LLMs, and the LLMs learned this term, now in these papers, they're real humans who wrote these papers citing this term.
So I have a question on this, or maybe to push a little bit, that the LLMs, they learn from everything that humans have produced so far, everything it has access to. But when you go off and do a history degree, we always say, why do we learn about the past? Well, if you understand the past, it can be a guide to the future. There are certain patterns in history and so on. So is there not some wisdom, if not objectivity, that comes from all of this knowledge that the language models are processing?
Yeah. So I don't want to diminish everyone who's studying history as well. A lot of science are needed to really understand history and understand how certain things are working. So I don't want to diminish this. And I mentioned this already. Right now, it's perceived that AI is just seen as this LLM. The profession of artificial intelligence has much more knowledge pathways. It includes robotics. It includes very powerful clustering algorithms, detection algorithms. Please never throw standard structured data into an LLM. When it's already in numbers in a tabular format, don't try to process it with an LLM. It just makes it worse. There are other AI algorithms, machine learning algorithms, who can make this much better. Now, what does it mean in terms of the science? We need to approach the world much more holistically, because your cognitive function are not only, you don't have only a language processor in your brain. You do have in your brain a lot of different functions. And even if we need the knowledge of the historians, we need people who courageously do future studies. We need people who go deeply into science like biology, physics, etc. But we need the exchange. Real AI, real intelligence comes when you combine the subjects. So don't want to diminish this, looking into the past. But right now, these LLMs have only limited cognitive capability if you compare it how our brain works and how our world looks like.
Thank you. Okay, I'm pretty convinced. I mean, I may have thought it was more objective, but okay, I'm pretty convinced by it. Who's convinced? Shake your rattles if you're convinced. That's pretty good. Okay, I think we probably can smash this myth. I mean, the question is, how are we going to smash the myth? I think, a very subtle hammer here to help smash the myth. So I'll smash the first one and see if we get to the other ones later. All right, so there we go. Myth is smashed. Thank you. It's always good to shake a rattle. Okay, so I'm going to keep this threateningly over the next myth. All right, so the next one is, AI is just technology, right? It's just a tool. It's like a hammer. Or do you think it's more than that? Is it simply the algorithm? When I think about it, it's more like a saw or a hammer than it is like anything truthful. It's just something useful. It's something we can use to assist us in some way. Do you think that's true?
Let's look at this. First of all, I want to just dismantle. I think it's not an issue. We need a much more positive approach to look to the world. And if you see problems everywhere and issues everywhere, it is an issue. But let's leave the issue aside and look on your analogy of having it as a tool. Of course, again, we talked already about this seemingly. It seems it can do a lot of things for me. It could write papers and come up with things, etc. But we are really right now seeing something which really enhances our society by a much larger extent. Let me give you an example. We did see the same when the Industrial Revolution came about. There are many, many people trying to fight that there are now machines taking over and automating things, and we had transportation coming out of it. Then we have seen how the internet came along. Initially, I'm from Switzerland, so who knows the CERN? It's a research center for particle physics. They invented the protocol, and they made a very smart decision. They made it public. They didn't patent it and knocked it down. They said, let's use it to exchange information across the world with many, many different scientists. So thanks to these courageous people, we have the internet. Now, if it would stay like this as a tool to exchange information, we would have never reached the vast economy, the vast connection across the world, and the vast potential it has brought to us on how it emerged. Could anyone tell us when these researchers really published this protocol that this is going to happen? It has changed the way how we can synthesize information, how we can get to information, how we can communicate with each other. You all probably know social media, etc. So it has revolutionized by a large extent how we are as a society.
So you're saying it's not just like a tool we can use, it's reshaping who we are to be using that tool. So Sky, you're saying it's changing, it's not just helping us in service of our values, it's reshaping what our values are.
Yes. And this is what we really need to take very carefully, because we should not underestimate the impact. We maybe have just heard from a neurologist how hard it's impacting your brain structures, how much your brain structures are declining, not only because of AI, just because in the world we are living in, we don't see natural sunlight anymore, we don't know how our brains are working. And if you just look at it as a tool, it looks like you can put it aside. But maybe you have seen these studies that our cognitive functions decline. And to make an educated decision about what do we want for our kids, how do I want to deal with using this technology, etc., you need to see this whole and embrace this whole vast thing, what AI is. And it calls not for the technical skills, it calls for human skills. So we need critical thinking, perspective skills, and a higher inner compass to make ethical decisions about this.
Can I push you on that? Let me ask, is there a real difference then with what AI is doing in our brains and what previous tools have done? I mean, I'm sure the invention of narrative or writing or printing and the widespread availability of books, surely this rewired our brains too. I mean, the printing press led to the Reformations very quickly, and you're Swiss, obviously, so yeah. So is this really a step change, or is it just the latest thing?
So I agree with you that a lot of inventions brought a lot of positivity. And so I vote the same, this will be done for AI. But it has a very, very high potential to really more vastly changing our brain structures and having much higher impact than any other technologies we have ever seen before. So that's why it's so important we understand and putting a lot of human skills, cognitive skills, and really question this and really try to accommodate not only on the left side of our brain, which has like every task automated, etc., as well, really strengthen us as humans to really together make conscious decision and use it for a positive change.
And are you saying it's not just a case, I mean, obviously it's a case of quantity because there's so much AI, it's reaching everyone. I heard that it's being used even in third world countries more than even the global north. You mentioned this earlier. And it's, but also, but qualitatively, is it really shifting things too? It's not just a case of scale, it's also the nature of the change?
Yes, it's definitely the nature of the change. So there was a really interesting study, you just cited this, came out 2 days ago. OpenAI analyzed all your prompts all over the world and came out about what we are prompting about. First of all, yes, third world countries, 3 times more prompts than developed countries. So you're already outnumbered. Second thing is, since July, more women using AI than men. From 2023, from this study, up to July 2025, it was men. Why is that? Because A, the accessibility path to AI is just natural language. You don't need to come up with a computer science degree to be able to use it. And the second thing is, I mentioned this, it's seemingly really social. It's appearing to be a friend. It's appearing to be a consultant and an advisor. And as well, it needs a lot of collaboration skills. Women have now a much higher interest on using really this tool set to really advance with this.
So you're saying it's not just a narrational experience of stories, it's a relational one now. It's a relational technology.
It is a relational. That's very interesting because our brains, it's called power psychology. It makes positive emotions. You know, we prompt something and it comes up with a very positive. Your brain doesn't differentiate if somebody said something nice to you or you read a nice quote from a prompt. You get a positive emotion in your brain, it releases some neurotransmitters and you're feeling happy, which means it really gives you this input. And we should have relationships to our AI companions as we have relationships to humans, but we need to, again here, consciously think about how do we shape this. We need to learn to collaborate with them, but we need to learn as well to differentiate us as humans with our cognitive functions and the beauty of what our brain can do.
Interesting. Okay, so I think you've actually pretty much convinced me on that because it's, it's not, you're saying, so it's not just simply a technology like a hammer, a very advanced hammer. It is actually it's rewiring how we think in terms of our values. Okay. I'm pretty convinced. What about you guys? You convinced? All right. My favorite response. I've seen The Avengers, so I know I'm worthy with this. Do you want to have a go?
No, go ahead.
Sure? All right, okay, I'll do this. All right. There we go. Okay. I'm going to leave this temptingly here. Let's see if you can convince me on the final question. So, this is something I very strongly believe is that AI should be banned in schools, myself. And the reason I think this is that, you know when you go to the gym, right? When you go to the gym, you're lifting weights to tear the muscles in order that the muscle fibers, having had micro tears, they grow back the next day stronger. That's how you gain strength in the gym. And so in a sense, if you had an exoskeleton in the gym, it'd be pointless. You could lift heavier weights, but it'd be no benefit to you. And I felt in school, I made a lot of errors, and I was always, I improved over the years, but I always feel the most valuable thing we can make are errors and mistakes, because you learn from that. You have a growth mindset from that. And I worry that AI is kind of like an exoskeleton for the mind, that people are never actually encountering the sorts of problems that are precisely what allow us to mature and learn. So it seemed to me that schools should ban AI. I think you disagree with this.
Yeah, I think I disagree with that. I need to make some disclaimers here, because I'm as well, since many, many decades, or more than 20 years, looking into neuroscience to be able to write code like neural networks. I needed to study how the brain looks like. And it's absolutely true, in a very young age, when the brains are developing very fast, the detrimental aspect of sitting in front of screens using these things are really, really bad. But you know, school is just not the first and the second grade. And school is much more wider. And I mentioned already that it is a relational thing. It's not only the exoskeleton. It's really reshaping our values, and it's reshaping our society. Now, if you would just leave it out, no one would have the skill to really develop a positive future with it. And there is a high risk that this technology is shaping us for the worse. Now, my advocate is really use it to develop how best to use it. I'm doing educations in school, and I always tell the teacher, I was like, okay, the pupils should really do homework and write a story and come back the next day. And then I want the kids sitting down, I was like, write 3 more ends of the story, different ones than what your AI came up with. So train perspective still. Question what was the output. Use learning as a way of how can I build a relationship? How can I build a healthy relationship? Because if you never ever have built a relationship, you're dropping out of school, you have access to these algorithms, and it will drown you because you have never learned how I can set my boundaries, how I can be critical, how I can make a perspective, and how I can develop my inner compass. And it's like, no, I don't want the AI to do this with me. So in order to really use it correctly, you need to train it in a safe environment with hopefully teachers who guide the kids on the way. Where do I set my boundaries? I don't say, you know, have your AI next to you 24 hours a day in school and out of school, but have very specific, conscious education about what can I do with it, where are the limitations, where are the subjective things, and learn this relationship. And by this, you really train a lot of human cognitive skills.
That's interesting, because I think you've just made me change my way of looking at it. Because if I think of it as an exoskeleton, that's one analogy. But actually, you could argue that a lot of education is about building immunity to the real world. So you get immunity by exposure. There was a famous study I remember I grew up in Canada. And in Canada, the Canadian government thought it'd be a great idea a lot of kids, well, some kids would have anaphylactic shock. If they encounter peanuts, they go into shock. And the government's solution was to ban all peanuts from schools. And they discovered 10 years later that rates of anaphylactic shock had gone up. And the reason was no one was getting exposed to peanuts.
Exactly.
And so are you basically arguing that far from AI being an exoskeleton making us weaker, the point is if it already exists out there,
yes,
then we need to learn how to handle it so we have immunity to its worst elements.
And the biggest thing why I want this to have a place in our education system, and I want to have a place in the education system to learn with AI, I want our education system to learn human skills, critical thinking, perspective skills, having an inner compass, relationship, communication. It's completely underrated. You don't get good grades. You get good grades if you recite something which you have learned earlier, and therefore you get a good grade. But I want to see our education system changing, for really building up humans who can stand up working with this technology, because there is a big potential on the dark side when we don't have these boundaries, when we don't make these conscious decisions, and therefore it's so important that the education system plays a role in a very optimistic future.
So AI is the reality, and we need to learn to live with the reality, not pretend it's not there.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, I'm pretty convinced by that. Okay, so shake your rattles if you're convinced. Well, okay, this is great. You know what comes next, but would you like to smash the myth? Okay, fine, great, fantastic.
So,
just don't put your back out. It's pretty heavy. Okay.
It is pretty heavy.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay. Okay, so please, for now, though, before they come on, please give it up for Bianca Scheffler. Thank you.